Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Elliot Williams, and I'm the training coordinator at the National Press Club Journalism Institute. Thank you for joining us. A few things to note before we begin. We are recording this program, and highlights will appear on our website and in our daily newsletter for journalists, which you can subscribe to using the link that we'll put in the chat and in our follow-up email. So throughout the program, please feel free to submit questions using the chat or the Q&A feature. Your questions will be addressed at the end of the program. And again, let us know where you're tuning in from, as many of you have already done in the chat. Look, we've all been there. You're brainstorming and coming up with ideas for a reporting project or a collaborative news initiative, and that one thought starts to loom overhead. If only I had the money. The truth is, the money is out there, but we're all fighting a two-part battle, knowing where to find the funding and then being selected to receive it over all the other qualified applicants in a competitive pool. While you won't walk away from today's conversation with a grant or a fellowship per se, you will learn strategies to find more opportunities, sharpen your proposals, and stand out among your peers to help you face these questions more confidently. To help pull back the curtain on this process, we're joined today by Anne Godlasky, president of the National Press Foundation. Hello, Anne. And shortly we'll be joined by Marina Walker Guevara, executive editor at the Pulitzer Center, as well as Monica Williams, an independent journalist and fellow at the Reynolds Journalism Institute. Hi, Monica. Good to have you with us. Each of us will share useful tips for finding the money, and who knows, maybe you'll learn about a fellowship or a grant that you didn't know about before. Hi, Marina. We were just introducing and welcoming everyone.
Hello,
I
everyone.
know I'll now ask each of you to introduce yourselves and tell the audience briefly one funding opportunity at your organization that you're really excited about, or the project you're currently working on. And Anne, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elliot, for hosting. And thank you, everyone who's joined. It's awesome to see such geographic variety in the chat. I'm Anne Godlasky. I'm the president of the National Press Foundation, which is a nonprofit that primarily trains working journalists. But one grant opportunity I'm really excited about right now is our annual rare disease reporting grant. And that's actually one that is open to journalists worldwide. Some of our opportunities are domestic only, but that is one that's available to anyone. And the deadline for that is October 12th. So coming up, but yeah, it's great, and we've been doing it annually and have just seen some really moving and wonderful work come out of that.
Thanks, Anne. I know we just also shared a link to that opportunity in the chat. So if anyone has more questions about that, obviously Anne's here to answer that, but you can find it there. Marina, why don't we go to you? Please share an opportunity at the Pulitzer Center that has an upcoming deadline or something you're excited about.
Thank you, Elliot. I'm Marina Walker, and I'm the executive editor at the Pulitzer Center. We are an organization that supports in-depth journalism worldwide and also work really hard with our communities and partners on audience engagement, just trying to not take the audiences for granted, connecting with communities, and really giving the opportunity for the journalism to really shine and really count in this very noisy environment, digital environment in which we live. One opportunity I'm very excited about is our Ocean Reporting Network. These are year-long fellowships for journalists who want to do an in-depth story, investigative or accountability story on issues related to the ocean. It can be the health of the ocean and climate change, but it can also be focusing on all the criminality that goes on in the ocean, as well as the impacts on coastal communities. Lots of topics. 70% of the world is covered by water. So this is a hugely underreported story, and we are just excited to convene a group of journalists from all over the world so they can in cohort collaborate and pursue their individual projects. So please apply. The deadline is coming up.
Thank you, Marina. Great opportunity there. Monica, let's go to you. Tell us a bit about your fellowship and about some of the work you've done in this field related to grants and fellowships.
Sure. Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Monica Williams. I started my long career now in mainstream media. I also have served on boards or staff of a nonprofit organization where I was kind of unexpectedly thrust into raising funds. I worked for a nonprofit newsroom. For the last few years, I've directed a news collaborative, and now I'm a remote part-time fellow at Reynolds Journalism Institute, which is based at the University of Missouri. RJI, the fellowship, supports people who have projects that are centered on innovation or inclusivity, or basically just trying to address pressing industry challenges. Just a plug for RJI online. That application opens December 1st. You can make an appointment with the director ahead of time if you have questions or you want to discuss it. For my project in particular, I'm focusing on grants, which is why I'm here, and building a website that will aggregate grants and fellowships for the journalism industry, but also have tools and resources and thought leadership centered on what we're all interested in.
Wonderful. And Monica, just to clarify, I know you mentioned your remote part-time. Can you talk a bit about the difference with remote or non-residential versus residential fellows at RJI?
Sure. RJI has for this particular fellowship, two tracks. There's one person who is residential and works out of the campus in Columbia, Missouri through the journalism school and is full-time. And then there are 6 to 8 or so projects that are chosen for remote part-time. And you're kind of working on your own more so and continuing your full-time work. And so this is sort of a part-time project, but with, deliverables and check-ins over the 8-month period.
That's wonderful. And Monica, continuing with you, I know your project is so needed right now in collecting, funding opportunities for journalists, including fellowships, including grants and other sort of creative opportunities. I'm curious about as you're tracking these opportunities, what are some of the trends you're seeing right now across the field?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially during a time where we're seeing a lot of headlines about the effects of government funding cuts to public broadcasting. The good news, however, is that we are also seeing at the same time more philanthropic efforts to support journalism projects. That wasn't as robust in the past, where some foundations who were not journalism focused, more of them are supporting journalism, so non-traditional work. And the data shows that the funding and the number of grants are kind of on par what we've seen in the last few years. So there are new grants and new funders. Personally, as I'm doing this research and talking to foundations, I'm seeing more grants to support coverage or usage of AI technology, digital innovation and information and cybersecurity. And then within journalism, some more topical things like climate resilience, climate change, sustainability are themes that are coming up a lot.
Yeah, so you're seeing more themed and sort of beat specific fellowships. There's also good news that there are new grants and fellowships popping up. I just want to remind our audience that we'll be taking your questions throughout this program in the comments as well as the Q&A function. And speaking of, we have a question in the chat right now that I was hoping to get to later, but I'll just jump in with it now. It's so relevant. So Nick asks, I've seen some applications that ask if you have a publication lined up or in mind. How does one navigate this? It's hard to get attention from editors as a freelancer. What's the best way to ask, hey, if I get this grant, will you publish it? Or is it just, hey, is it okay if I put your name on this application? It's a great question, as many grants and fellowships require a letter of commitment. How committed does a publisher need to be? Marina, can we go to you first?
Thank you. I like to say that an outlet needs to be interested. It's amazing if they're committed, and of course it gives us a bigger sense of safety, because ultimately what we want is that those stories be published, right? Like we want that's the impact. That's what you want. That's what the journalists want, that their stories reach those audiences. So at least we ask that an outlet be interested. And what I tell to journalists, like, don't sweat it. You were going to pitch that story anyway. Maybe you are pitching it a little bit earlier, but if you're applying for a reporting grant, it's because you have done some pre-reporting. You have some goods to show. So just talk to your editor. They are much more aware about the need for philanthropy and for reporting grants. Many outlets actually really are grateful that this exists, because they could not support the reporting that is needed to be done for the stories, the travel and the software, the reporting partners, and so on. So pitch your great story and then show them how this extra support, this funding, can help you be very ambitious. You will deliver a story that will make them really proud, that would do this new thing, or reach this new audience, or try this new technique. And it would be really important to have their support in the application, so it goes better for them. So I think there are ways, and editors are much more, as I said before, aware that this is a need.
Definitely.
Also, write the letter, maybe offer to write like an initial letter for them, or a couple paragraphs, and then they can make it their own. So just to facilitate the process.
Thank you, Marina. And anything to add?
I think Marina summed it up great. I would say, yeah, I mean, we are totally open to freelancers applying, but if you can show a history with an editor, that there's a relationship established, I think that kind of gives you bonus points. And also feel free, I've seen letters from editors on behalf of freelance journalists where they say something along the lines of, we are interested, of course we can't promise, which, we're all journalists and we absolutely understand that. We don't expect anyone to make a promise without seeing, the work. So that kind of language is fine to include.
And Monica, I know you've worked for several newsrooms, but also as a freelancer. Do you have anything to add to that point?
So I think getting a letter beforehand, before you submit the application is definitely the way to go. And I'm saying this with my editor's hat on, and having had freelancers submit grant applications without talking to me beforehand. I think it's a good, and I get it, sometimes you're busy and you can't reach it, or you want to just really get this application in, and that's fine. But I think a couple of things to consider. You want to make sure that the newsroom actually has, even though your project proposal might be amazing, that they have the time to work with you, that they have an editor that will be dedicated to help you see this through. So you won't know that unless you have that conversation, and sort of what the newsrooms, what their focus is right now, because you might have this wonderful story on immigration, and right now they're focusing on Medicaid. So I just suggest if you can get a conversation with the editor before you submit the application, so everybody's on the same page.
Definitely. We have a few questions coming in, both in the Q&A and the chat. I'll pull from the Q&A first. Someone says they're writing a book on reporter safety and practical information for journalists who work in the field covering demonstrations. What type of grant could help support such a book with this, whether it's around editing, publishing, or distribution? What would that look like for a book project? I'm curious if you all know of anything for book length projects.
We don't. Yes, so someone mentioned the Lucas Prize, which is a great one for book length projects. National Press Foundation doesn't accept books, but because of the topic that this person is looking at, they might also look into the IWMF or an organization that has, a real commitment to safety.
Definitely. I'm seeing someone mention that. as
Pulitzer
well.
Center also doesn't accept books, but I have to say many reporting projects that we have supported have been the basis of future books. And in some cases, it happens that the journalist wasn't thinking about the book when they did the amazing initial story. And in some cases, they were thinking about the book. And to do that first kind of like series, maybe gave them the basis for the first couple of chapters, something to show to book publishers and others. And so think about that. If you already had the book idea and would like to get some reporting done that can allow you to have a better book proposal, then think about doing first a series or an in-depth story with the Pulitzer Center or somebody else.
And Marina, there's a follow-up question in here asking about grants for international and national projects. Can you shed a bit of light on the difference there in the application process or how that's sort of viewed?
Yeah. So the Pulitzer Center has started actually mostly like 20 years ago as an organization that would fill in the gaps of like the foreign bureaus that were closing. And so initially it was more about sending people or supporting people who needed to report important stories in other countries. Now we do both. There's still a good number of people that are reporting on peace and conflict, on environmental issues for global audiences, and they need to travel. All this is, there are many very local stories, and there's so many stories that cross borders. My own background is in cross-border reporting, so I know that that is a big need in the industry. Having said that, in recent years we are supporting a lot more local journalists who, all over the world. Our mission is very global. We do have some focus areas in the global south, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Africa, Latin America, but also North America. And then also very eager to support stories that follow supply chains, follow the money, follow the playbooks around the world. So I think there's a space for everyone at the Pulitzer Center.
Thank you. I want to back up a bit here and ask more of a general question before getting back to audience questions. What are, some commonalities among successful participants as you're seeing several hundred, in some cases thousands of applications? What do you sort of see stand out depending on the different fellowships and grants? And we can go to you, Anne, first.
Yeah, so I would say that what we want to see is a demonstration of how you'll use the money immediately. And by that, I don't mean it has to be an immediate turnaround, but we want to know, okay, you already have done pre-reporting here, you know exactly kind of what you want to go after. That doesn't mean that, if you list 5 sources, that those have to be the 5 sources that ultimately are included in your piece. We understand that things change as reporting takes place, but we want to see some real specifics and commitment for sure of how it will be applied.
Absolutely. Marina, anything to add there?
We are looking for authentic voices. So no AI in writing your proposal. Your authentic voice and your passion for the project that you want to report. Don't worry so much about trying to fit what you think the funder wants. Thankfully, we are pretty broad at the Pulitzer Center, and all of these organizations we try to accommodate as much as possible. But tell us a story that you are passionate about and why that matters and to whom. So don't forget, we have added in recent years questions about audience. Who is the audience that needs to engage with this work? And then the next question is, how are you planning to reach that audience? Tell us about the distribution, but also tell us if there are any other creative ways in which you or the outlet wants or will connect with the audiences. And finally, show your work, show your pre-reporting. And I understand, especially for freelancers, it's really hard because people say like, well, we have to do it for free, like we have to invest our own time. And sometimes, unfortunately, that is the case, and we're not expecting 3 months of free labor or anything like that. But even if you can make a few phone calls, you can start looking at the data a little bit, identify a couple of cases, just show us that there's promise here and that you are excited and that there's some concrete steps that you've taken, because that's going to make it shine over other proposals that might be very general. There's a lot of competition out there, unfortunately.
There's a lot of competition out there. To that point, several grants and fellowships require a budget proposal and information on how you plan to budget it out. I'm hoping you all can kind of shed light on this. Monica, maybe let's start with you, as I know you've successfully applied for several fellowships, grants, helped connect newsrooms with foundations. How does that budget usually take shape as you're kind of going through with that fellowship process?
Ooh, that's a great question. Something I'm still learning, to be quite honest. As journalists, we're so used to focusing on the words. And so even though I was a financial journalist, doing the budget always gives me a little bit of angst. One of the things that I think it's important to, whether it requires it in the first round or not, is to map that out, how you will spend those funds, right away. I would say one mistake I made early as writing grants for, say, a group of reporters or a group of newsrooms is not paying myself, leaving myself out of the, as a line item. And came up in my Reynolds interview. Make sure you set aside money for yourself, because factor in how much time it will take you as well to, excuse me, to work on the project. And look at things like research and development, a developer and a designer. And so, yeah, I'm sure they can shed more light on it, as I'm still trying to figure out the process myself.
Definitely. Anne or Marina, anything to add there?
Yeah, I would say try to do your planning, like we like when we see very specific, not hyper specific budgets, but, for example, people who say, okay, I'm going to be 7 days in the field. And I've looked a little bit around, and it looks like it's going to cost between $80 and $100 a night. Plus, this is it's going to be for food. People also factor in fuel, or if they are working with any local partners, how much their day rate is, and that is easy. There are listservs, you can have contacts, just figure it out more or less. How much do people pay local reporting partners in this area? So the more specific, the more credible. Don't cut yourself short, as Monica said. In our fellowships, we include salaries. So we try to provide a decent salary for a journalist for a year, the duration of the program. For the reporting grants, we usually cover the cost of reporting the story, and we still hope that newsrooms will pay journalists, will pay freelancers. Definitely they pay their staff, but that also they will pay freelancers for the work they're doing for them. And that sadly is not the reality in many parts of the world. We are seeing outlets that have pretty formidable platforms, and they said, we'll happily give you our platform to publish your story, but we can't pay you. And that is really disappointing. And in some cases, so what we tell freelancers is, when you apply, if you are not going to be paid, or if there's this big gap, make the case in the application. Sometimes we can honor it, or we can at least honor part of it. Sometimes we can't. And we still hope and try to work with outlets so they do their part, because philanthropy cannot take over everything. That's not the way that the media industry should work.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask a question from our Q&A that I think addresses several questions that have come in. Regarding grant applications, most require letters of recommendation, but for those of us who don't work as freelance journalists full-time because they need to make rent or are branching out to journalism adjacent activities, who should these letters of recommendation come from, ideally, and what should they speak on, whether that's quality of research, character, or the quality of the writing? And that's for anyone here to answer.
I would say all of the above. For grants, we don't require letters of recommendation, just names and contacts in case we need to call someone to ask about you. For fellowships, it's more common to ask for these letters of recommendations. And we want to hear, we want to hear maybe a concrete example of a great and complex project you delivered. We want to hear how you play with others. Are you a good collaborator? Are you a good team player? We want to hear about, any particular skill that you have. For example, like if, you may be applying for a text story, but, we learned through this letter that you did an amazing podcast before, so anything that would help kind of like get that like full round view of your amazing self.
Absolutely. I see several questions about specific projects and subject matters. I would recommend you actually go to the tool that Monica is developing and the spreadsheet. We actually put it in the chat. You'll see a Google document in there and see if what you're asking about aligns with any of those rather than go through each individual request for a topic. However, we do have a question about about nonprofit newsrooms and smaller newsrooms. This is a good question about whether some of those organizations might be more receptive to different fellowships or grants. So in other words, do you all see any differences? And Monica, this might be a question for you in terms of nonprofits and smaller newsrooms, independent outlets, in terms of the fellowships and grants that they accept and work with.
Great question. I do sense more openness. This is from foundations for newsrooms to work with nonprofit over for-profit. That's for now, though, they're open to for-profit institutions, but nonprofit seems to be sort of in what I'm seeing, a little bit of edge. One of the trends that I'm seeing I just came from the Sustainability News Summit, and a conversation that came up there and is coming up in general is, and this is particularly something that perhaps smaller newsrooms might want to consider, as collaboration. And collaboration is sort of a buzzword now. And some of the funders said, hey, if you don't have a collaborator, you probably really should. It could be another newsroom. It could be a cross sector partnership. So a nonprofit organization, it doesn't have to be, another newsroom. It could be an arts council, or if you have an environmental journalism project, maybe there's an organization in your community that's focuses on the environment. So some kind of partnership that helps with reach, shows how to work with others, and are considering audience engagement, I think because let's face it, a lot of small newsrooms don't have the resources to perhaps, carry out a project. So a collaborator could really help. And it's pretty much what funders are talking about right now, at least with newsrooms.
Absolutely. Another question here is about depth versus breadth. So what's your perspective on depth versus breadth when it comes to a reporter's background and what they've published? Should it be relevant to the grant's topic, or can they have demonstrated work in other topics?
I'm worried less about somebody being a complete expert on something. Like we say a lot of on our fellowship for reporting on AI, which is not reporting with AI, but learning to investigate the impacts and the societal impacts of AI. And people ask us, well, but do I have to be technical? Do I have to be a tech reporter? And we say, no, you just have to be a really good reporter, because this is a tough story. It needs a lot of digging, big actors, big tech. So what we are looking is for that ambition in the past, for having been able to dig, to hold, big corporations accountable, or maybe the small corporation, but that plays a big role in your hometown. And it might depend. It might depend in some of the most specific. If you want to do like a super ambitious ocean project that involves all this, different. Well, we might ask, where is this interest coming from, or like it looks like you reported on voting your entire life. So we like the leaps, but help us understand a little bit the leaps. It's all about just using the application form And maybe using a friend to read it or a mentor to read your application form. I think that's a good tip, because another person is going to find those gaps, is going to have those questions, and then it can help you then fill in the gaps before you submit.
Always proofread and always have someone else help with that. I also see that Kristen, thank you, Kristen, sharing lots of resources in the chat. We also have a question about the interview process. I think this is a good point to talk about that step. As a science, health, and technology journalist, Ezra says that they often reach the interview stage in a fellowship program, but struggle to succeed there. What are some of the keys to performing well in fellowship interviews? And what should they pay particular attention to when preparing and presenting their project? That's a question for any of you, but Anne, why don't we start with you?
I think that if you've made it to the fellowship interview phase, they already are impressed with your resume and your project idea. So I think what that part of it is really about is kind of, as Marina said before, will you play well with others? I think they're really trying to get a sense of your personality, your curiosity. I think that obviously if you are applying for a fellowship, hopefully you are very open to learning, and they want to see that come across. And obviously it's going to be different for different fellowships in terms of the kind of expertise they want. But I think typically at the interview stage, your expertise has been established. And so it really is more about fit at that point.
And it's important to, before you apply, to understand, like, do you want a reporting grant or a fellowship? And these are different moments in one's career, like they're like different fits for a particular story. You know, a fellowship, you want more than just to do a story. You are wanting to grow, you are wanting to be in community with others, you are wanting maybe like a little bit of a career transformation or you know, sprint. So those are the reasons for a fellowship. And because of that, the fellowship demands more time, more investment, more focus, because you are in some ways giving yourself this special time to accomplish more than producing a story or a podcast or something like that. Whereas in other moments of my career, I remember people were encouraging me to apply for these fellowships, and I kept telling them, I'm having like a lot of fun with my stories, so let me do a few more stories, and then I'll take that year-long fellowship in a university where you disconnect and you think about yourself and the future and all that. So think about what you want to do, and at the Pulitzer Center you can do both. You can do the fellowship experience, and but if you are not ready for that, and what you want to do is to pursue that really important story that the world needs to see, and be left a little bit alone, just, you know, give me the money I need, a little bit of community, but for the most part, I know what I'm doing and I just want to go and do it. And we're cool with that. We have the structure to support that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you both. We have a question that's really interesting here. So an MFA student is wondering if they're eligible for reporting grants if they have, say, creative writing experience related to that topic. Let's say it's a specific beat fellowship and they've written creative nonfiction or even fiction. Do you see that often? And how does that tend to play out in the interview and application process?
Creative nonfiction or narrative journalism would be fine to include in an application. Fiction would not, for obvious reasons. I think that someone, if that's their background, writing fiction in this area, you know, you could work it into the application in the sense of illustrating your enthusiasm for the subject area and your longtime interest in it, and perhaps research that you've done into it. But if your primary background is in fiction, I do think you'll have a hard time competing for a journalism fellowship, competing against journalists, because there are a lot of journalists who really do need funding right now. And so, yeah.
That makes total sense, and thank you. Another question here from the Q&A So this is someone who sees that it's a requirement for some applications to have been working full-time as a freelance journalist over a certain number of years. However, that's not always a realistic scenario. Sometimes people are early career or even mid-career. How do you suggest that they navigate that? How do you sort of quantify certain experience over, exact years as a full-time freelancer? And in general, I mean, this gets at a bigger question around, um, like how if someone doesn't have 100% of the requirements, should they just avoid applying for a grant or a fellowship?
I don't think you need sort of like a job application, right? Like, I don't think you need to hit 100% of everything. I would say, to make sure that your interest in it is really authentic. What we don't want to see is if it is a fellowship or a grant for a very specific beat, and you have shown zero interest in that up until now, then it kind of feels like, okay, you're just looking for some money right now. But to someone's point earlier, we're fine with seeing a range of experience as long as the interest in this particular thing, there's something backing it up.
Absolutely. And just to clarify, the person asking about the MFA is that they're getting an MFA in narrative nonfiction writing. So they're asking, are students eligible for reporting grants? My apologies. So just to clarify, they're asking whether students can apply for reporting grants. Do you want to shed light on that?
So at the Pulitzer Center, we have a campus consortium, and it's comprised of about 40 universities of diverse kind of universities, and the opportunities are for students with those universities. So I will get the link and put it here, and maybe your university is part of the Pulitzer Center, or you can convince your university, your professor, to join the campus consortium, and then there are opportunities for reporting grants for students.
Thank you. And Monica, are you seeing in your project as you're collecting, several fellowships, many grants open to students, encouraging students, or is that something that you think there could be honestly more work done for students?
Oh gosh, there's always room for more work, but yes, I'm seeing there are a lot of programs specifically geared towards students as well. I got a couple when I was a student and sort of helped propel my career and, have something on my resume that I can present to an employer. I just want to go back to the question about applying if you don't meet 100% of the requirements. I don't know if everyone remembers this, or maybe if you're a student, you do not, but there was a Harvard Business Review article maybe about a decade ago, and it talked about how men tend to apply for opportunities when they meet 60% of the requirements of a job or a fellowship or what have you, whereas women wait until we have 100% of the requirements, everything ticked off before we apply. I probably would guess that it's lower than that for other marginalized communities. So I always advise people to apply anyway and let them tell don't rule yourself out of the process. And some of us tend to over prepare.
And I would say you were asking Elliot about like years of experience. To me, like more than years of experience is like the previous work you have done that you are showing us. We ask for like 3 stories that you are proud of. And those, just think carefully about the diversity of stories and what you want to show with each of your clips. And make sure that the clips you are showing match the ambition of the project you are proposing now. Because some people are sometimes propose for example, like a very complex data-driven project, but then you look at the clips and the clips are very featurey, like there's no data work there. And so then there's a gap, like those gaps, in the application where we are like, and how are you going to do all this data work? And so maybe the answer is very simple. I'm partnering with a data person in my newsroom, and we already have all these things going and this plan. But if you don't tell us that, then we are left wondering. And the last thing you want is, when there's a lot of competition, is for people to be left wondering. So maybe over communicate a little bit. Sometimes it's better. At the Pulitzer Center, we even have like a section that is called additional materials. And you can just upload a Word document with a couple of extra thoughts that may answer these gaps in the application.
That's such helpful advice. I love what you said about sometimes you need to over communicate, over explain. I think we're used to, especially as journalists, not making ourselves a story, being humble, which is a great quality. But of course, when you're pitching yourself, your project, this gets at a question someone asked if they have institutional writing background and are applying to try to break into journalism. Put that in there. What I'm hearing here is include that. In fact, highlight and emphasize that background, and you may have success here. We have a question in the Q&A about whether most fellowship or grant opportunities are centered on a specific story, pitch, or a series, or are there grants and fellowships focused on projects? So, for example, improving tech in newsrooms, or hiring practices, community engagement, source tracking. So sort of almost like administrative and newsroom development versus story grants. What's out there for different projects or different fellowships?
I'm sure there are grants that are thematic. The caregiving is one that I've worked on, the caregiving of older adult stories, it's centered on that, or aging. There are stories that are just about, you see more democracy and or broader cover, or things that cover local communities. But yes, there are foundations that will support operational expenses. You can, say we need a reporter, or we want to do research or a survey that helps us, it informs our reporting. So yeah, all three.
I'm going to break in here with a question of my own before getting back to your wonderful question. So inevitably, some, if not many, applicants will use AI in some form throughout their application process. What guidance do you have for journalists who want to use AI to assist them in some way with applications? Should they be using it at all? And Anne, I'll start with you.
Don't copy paste. Do not copy paste from AI. I'm not going to tell anyone not to use it at all. I think it can be helpful in the sense of you putting your own information that you've written into it and kind of interrogating it. So saying, here's my information, here is the application page. Does this sound like I'm playing up enough about this thing? I think having those sorts of conversations with AI are fine and can help identify like possible weaknesses or that sort of thing. But please don't have your AI do your writing for you, especially for a journalism grant. If it's a reporting grant, we want to hear your voice and we want to hear your writing. Marina made this point. We want something authentic, and we want who you are to come through the application. And those are the ones that are the most successful.
I would only add that the people reading these applications in most of these organizations are journalists, are practicing journalists. So we want to read a good story. We recognize the dullness of AI, and we are so bored, and it's a big turn off. So it might save you some time, but it's going to hurt you because we are journalists and we can recognize it very easily, and we get bored. And when you get bored, you don't want to keep reading, and that's it, right? So I don't think you would use it to pitch it to your investigations editor at your outlet. So don't use it to pitch it to get support, financial support, especially at a time when so many people need it and you need it. And so, yeah, but use it for translation. Some of the uses that Anne mentioned, we're not saying no to everything. Just don't have it write it for you. You write better than AI.
There was a great article in Neiman Reports over the last couple of weeks where Catherine Reynolds Lewis, who had reviewed about over 1,000 applications, decided to put them in AI and found that 50% of them had, used AI in their applications, and not just a ChatGPT question on coming up with topicals, but like cut and paste a significant amount of information into their application. And what she found from those applications is the ones who had used AI, she called them soulless. And she also said they weren't on topic. They didn't really answer the question. So the sentences were complete, but they didn't get across what their reporting grant might be about. She couldn't. And so I guess that's a lesson to, if you're going to use it, at least edit it and make sure it's on topic and add some soul.
You're looking for originality.
There you go.
That's really, really helpful advice. Here's a great question from Michaela. For those of us returning to journalism after a significant hiatus in another field, can our clips be older, say 15 years in the past? Would supplementing with more recent interviews, speaking engagements, podcasts, perhaps white papers they've written help in their case?
Go ahead, Anne, and I can.
Oh, I was just going to say, if your most recent clips are 15 years ago, probably you want to get some more recent clips before applying for a big grant or project. But in terms of actual requirements of how recent the clips are, it's going to, usually that's something that's stated in the application. So it's going to vary from organization to organization.
And that might be, again, another opportunity to explain, when you introduce yourself, why is that gap? And, it might be an explanation that makes a lot of sense. It might be an industry that is very related to journalism, so, yeah.
Thank you. I'm curious, just in general, if you can point out just common mistakes you see. We talked about obviously over relying on AI as a big example, but are there certain things that you just, every time you see it, you wish you could tell that person, oh, if you'd only avoided this?
Sometimes we'll get recommendation letters that are clearly from another, like it'll say like, thank you for, considering me for, and it'll be not us. It'll be another organization. So, check those. Also not copy edit, like you shouldn't have like copy editing errors or grammar or spelling mistakes. I mean, that's kind of basic. And then the other thing I would say is just, use the word limits as kind of a guide of how much is desired. So if it's asking for up to 350 words and you provide a sentence, that's probably not fulfilling what the organization is looking for in terms of level of detail. So yeah.
Thank you. And any other common mistakes, Marina?
I would say inflating budgets. And not necessarily because people are not being honest. It's just sometimes they're not doing the math and the work. And so they are just giving you like these big round numbers. And, again, show me the math, show me the work, show me how much things cost, because funds are limited and we have to make them last for a lot of people. The other thing, I forgot the other point I was going to make. So I'm gonna turn it over to Monica, and then I will remember. Do you have?
Sure. Monica, do you have any common mistakes that you've seen, or as you've applied, if there's things that you wish you knew, even as you've successfully applied for fellowships?
I think I talked about the budget, and in the budget, not just not paying myself, but just trying to do too many things with a small budget. I can do 5,000 stories with $1,000. Well, that's, I mean, I'm exaggerating, obviously, but that's not realistic. When it comes to newsrooms and collaboratives and foundational grants, my biggest lesson, and someone told me this beforehand, is relationship building, because sure, your application is great, but I think foundations want to get to know you. And as a longtime journalist, I was very careful about, getting to know a program officer and making those relationships, trying to make sure I had boundaries. But I have had funders say, if you don't make the call and get to know them and have coffee beforehand, you pretty much can assure yourself that you won't get that grant. So relationships are important.
And I remember my point, and it was about every story. Stories don't live in a vacuum, and you are likely not the first person that has reported this angle of this particular story. So it's really refreshing to see people who would take the time to show you where this story sits in the continuum of knowledge that we all are creating as an industry about a particular topic, about a particular town, person, company, and so on. And so that kind of like background, just saying, yes, I'm not the first one. And actually, there were like 2 great stories recently. However, my piece is going to be different because of X. I think that is something that also editors in the newsroom want to see when you pitch a story. So don't make us do the work for you, which we will do, but do it yourself. We even put a question now in the Pulitzer Center questionnaire, like what has been published on this topic and how does your story take it to a next level or deliver it to a new audience. So take advantage of that question. And the Pulitzer Center website is a good cheat sheet because we republish the story from our grantees. So at least you can see what we have already supported and make sure, if you comment on that, that's amazing. And say how yours is going to be different and take it to the next level.
I think that's a common step people sometimes skip, is especially if this is an annual grant or fellowship, seeing past work and seeing whether your work and your pitch kind of aligns with the ethos of what that organization or foundation has already supported. You might have the best idea in the world, but if it does not fit what that organization is putting out there, then you kind of need to reevaluate. So that's a really great point. And it's great that I noticed you all republish on your site as well. So that's great. I'm just going to go back to this because this is a question that we've actually gotten several times in here about the letter of commitment. With regarding obtaining a letter, in this person's experience as a freelancer, a lot of editors are reluctant to provide a letter and commit to a project in the early development of that project. So it can be a bit of a catch-22. You need a letter to get a grant, but you can't always develop your project without that grant. So, how do you kind of navigate that? And sometimes editors also take a long time to get back to you as they're incredibly busy. So you may miss that grant deadline. You see the deadline coming up. Any sort of Hail Mary miracle experiences or things that you recommend people do to navigate that? Should they look elsewhere? Should they, it's sort of a big question, but I've seen it in different forms here. And we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions after this.
Sometimes people they don't have a formal letter, but they still include, for example, the exchange with the editor that they had. And that, that shows a lot of goodwill, right? Like maybe you don't have a full commitment, but you are showing that you are in conversation with the editor. And maybe, so if that is all you have at the time of submission, just include that. They give us screenshots and so on. And then if we're interested in the project, then we will work with you. We will go back and we would say, okay, so can we get this editor? We're interested in the project. You might say to the editor that there's interest from the Pulitzer Center, see if you can get their commitment. Mm-hmm. So whatever you can explain in the application, just don't leave it blank. Again, let's avoid those gaps.
Absolutely. So I'm going to kind of do a bit of a rapid fire here just to see if we can get a few final questions in, and whoever wants to answer, that'd be great. So someone's asking about whether asking potentially for too much money is of concern. Let's say there isn't necessarily a guideline, or even if there is a range, if someone asks for the higher end of that range, do you have concerns around that? How do you recommend people stick to a sort of realistic budget when applying? And Monica, I know you've talked about budget a little bit here, but maybe you can illuminate this a bit.
I'm actually on the other end. I always ask for too little, but I think the line items will help where you show, it will take 10 hours to translate these documents. I'm going to pay this person $30 per hour. That equals 300, right? Kind of go through it like you would your home budget, right? And talk about that. A lot of the grants have got, a range. We give 1,000 to 10,000, and then look and see also what they've maybe given before to people who've done similar projects. But I'd say be realistic. I'm still working on asking for more. I think that's a childhood issue.
All right, like don't undersell yourself, but also be realistic, intentional about what you're applying for. And this is, I think we have time actually for one more question, and this one I think addresses a lot of the questions people had. So let's say you're applying for a grant or fellowship, and you live in DC, but the subject, the topic you're looking into is in Georgia. You've maybe not written about Georgia or communities in Georgia before. How likely is it that that person's proposal will be strongly considered, approved? Is that immediate rejection, say they don't live there or haven't written about it before?
No, not at all. Like what we are looking is, the work that you have done, to see if you have a thoughtful approach to that story. So why are you interested? Who is the audience? And then what pre-reporting have you done? We really like when we see when journalists are going to other parts of the country or other parts of the world, and they already have identified other journalists in the area and are planning not to co-write a story or anything like that, but at least to have a coffee with somebody or say, hey, I already identified a journalist who did this story 10 years ago. They have moved on and are doing something else, but I would love to catch up with that person to get all that context from the time when they wrote about it. So that is a thoughtful person. That is someone who is not parachuting, who is doing their work, and who is showing it to us as we make the consideration. So that would be my short answer. I don't know, Anne, if you have.
That's encouraging and that's really helpful. Anne, do you want to add anything to that?
Just the point on, I think that we've all become, much more aware and wary of parachute journalism. So if that is what you're doing, and by that I mean, trying to report on a Georgia story when you're living in DC, just make sure that you're explaining, what steps you're taking to avoid that, and to make sure that you're, providing all the proper context and kind of not being exploitative in those cases.
And in general, it sounds like explaining your steps helps throughout this entire process. And you talked about pre-reporting. I think that's part of it, is knowing, okay,
exactly.
Talk to this person, I'll, having your steps in place. So that's very helpful. Well, look, this hour went by very, very fast. We have so many great questions. What are ways people can reach you or your organizations if they have more questions? Maybe it'd be helpful to put in the chat if there's anything that comes to mind. But thank you to our panelists for such great insights here, and to our audience for great questions, as well as a lively chat. Yes, we will be sending out a recording of this video to all registrants and attendees. We'll share that link to the recording soon. It'll be in our newsletter as well as our website. The National Press Club Journalism Institute is proud to produce programs like this at no cost to journalists across the world, with the mission of powering strong journalism in the public interest. If you'd like to support us in this work, we hope you'll consider making a donation today. And please spare a few minutes to fill out our survey. We'll share that link in that email as well as in the chat. Tell us how we did today, how we can keep improving our programming for journalists, communicators like yourselves. Thank you for joining us. And I'll just go around while we still have a minute here. Any last advice, any last encouragement for the over 100 people who signed up and joined this conversation? Let's do a round robin. Marina, let's start with you.
Try again if you get a rejection. It's not about you. Your story is good. You are good. There are a million other factors why you may have been rejected. So please try again. We have many experiences of people who were rejected and then accepted multiple times after that.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. A no doesn't necessarily mean a no. It just means a no right now, but it doesn't mean later on you can't go back. And also fight that imposter syndrome and apply.
Absolutely. Anne, any last words here?
Yeah, I'm basically echoing Monica. Go for it. Just, yeah, get the application in. And if you can, don't leave it to the last minute. The fellowships I've gotten are ones where I've actually prepared. The ones I have not have been ones where it's like, well, it's due at 11:59, you know. So
Absolutely. Great advice, great insights. Thank you. Thank you three so very much. And again, thank you to our audience for tuning in and for your great questions. We hope you have a great rest of your day and your week. Take care.
Thank you
you.
so much, Elliot. Thank you, Monica and Anne.
Thanks. It was
bye-bye. Thank you.
And everyone.